Reading is a recursive process that consists of pre-reading, reading, and rereading. We call this process SQ3R+R, or survey, question, read, recite, review, and relate. In this presentation, we will review each of these terms and how the SQ3R+R process may be used to help guide our reading processes, as well as explications and analyses of texts. While the process is recursive, which means it can be applied repeatedly and recurs, a good place to start is with survey. The word survey means to take a comprehensive or detailed view, to inspect, or to examine. It's where we get the word surveillance, but no matter how you look at it, surveying is a means of collecting information, and that's exactly what surveying in the recursive reading process means. Surveying includes scanning the frame of a text, including the title, headings, introductions, conclusions, illustrations, front and back matter, and first and last sentences of paragraphs. Chances are you probably already do some of this when you quickly scan a text. When we read, we often scan for a book's most prominent points, the parts that easily stick out, and so logically these are its beginnings and ends, as well as non-textual matter, the stuff that doesn't fit. To start with then, your survey should give you a rough hypothesis about the text, its subject, the author's purpose, and intended audience. For instance, the multicolored simple geometric graphics of this presentation signal that it may be an educational product that we're looking at. Surveying doesn't stop with the text, however. You should also examine the knowledge, beliefs, and interests that you bring to the text at hand. Ask yourself, what experiences do you have that are relevant to the reading? What are your reasons for reading the text? And how will these reasons affect what you are looking for and recalling? Again, as a for instance, how you approach this presentation will be different from the way you walk into a theater or read the back of a cereal box. Being conscious of your reading practices will help you to navigate any text. The questioning stage is my favorite stage, so I'm going to save it for last. This means we'll be moving right on into the reading stage. The reading stage is tricky. You should be doing more than glancing your eyes over a text as you read. Skimming like this is called passive reading. We often passively read when we're tired, and our eyes keep moving even though our minds have long since stopped paying attention. Taking notes is one smart way to initiate an active reading process. Handwriting triggers several neuropsychological processes and requires both the spatial and visual parts of the brain to work together, strengthening the process by which we form memories. It has been suggested that all attentive students, whether or not they take notes, remember roughly the same amount of material delivered in class. However, students who have taken notes remember key facts and concepts, whereas those who do not take notes often remember an odd assortment of ideas. In other words, when we write, we make active decisions about what is important and what is not. So you should be annotating as you read. Underline or highlight key terms and passages, write notes that address questions, explore associations and connections, and recount memories inspired by the reading. Argue with the text, support it, but put your annotations somewhere in writing. And yet still, be careful. If you highlight, underline, and mark everything, it will become difficult to locate important or relevant passages when they're needed. If you find yourself overmarking your text, begin creating a table of contents or index for yourself in the front or back of a book and pages. Also try to keep common annotations brief and consistent. For instance, use question marks for confusing sections, exclamation points for surprising sections, and ellipses for passages that leave you speechless. After you have read, you should recite. That is, summarize the text in your own words. Simply write a brief summary and check your comprehension and memory against the text. Recite as you read, recite when you finish, summarize the main idea, connect ideas to each other, rephrase the text into your own words. The benefit of all this is that it helps you to remember what you just read through repetition and association. All analysis begins with a summary of the text, and reciting helps with this. After all, it is impossible to think critically about the details of something of which you have no memory. The next stage sounds a lot like the previous. It's called review. But rather than summarize or paraphrase the text as you would in reciting, reviewing calls for a higher critical thinking skill, evaluation. In fact, one way you might remember the difference is by associating this stage with peer reviews, sessions where your colleagues read and evaluate your work. So when you review, you should be rereading passages you have marked, seeking answers to your questions, asking why the text is important, and challenging your previous conceptions or finding further support. The final R in the SQ3R+R process is relate. This stage asks you to make connections and associations with your own experiences and interests, your own writing, and other texts. Making such connections will help you to develop personal insights and conversations that bring a world of ideas and experiences together. This is not to say that you should discuss the text as if it is only important to you, or as if it speaks entirely for you. Instead, relating means experiencing and contributing yet another link in the vast network of information in which you are a relevant part. The one stage left to cover, questioning, should occur throughout your reading process. That is, before you begin reading, while you're reading, and after you've put the text down. They should be guided by your goals and what you want to know. For instance, a question that may be at the forefront of your mind while watching this presentation is, how do I use the SQ3R+R process to analyze a text? After all, it seems to work well enough for explication, or identifying generally well-accepted information, such as surveying a text genre, but in fact it can also help guide analyses. An analysis breaks down a text to illuminate poignant components of the text. It is the opposite of synthesis. In fact, synthesis and analysis can also be explained as composition and decomposition. This play on words is one of the ways biology and language intersect. The SQ3R+R process helps us to make such analyses by providing a framework for our questions. There are two sets of questions you may ask. There's the set of journalist questions, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then there are the questions presented by Burke's pentad, or 5 rhetorical elements known as agent, agency, act, scene, and purpose. You might be able to already tell these two sets of questions correlate in some ways. For instance, the journalist question, why, seems to ask the same question that a question of purpose does. The two sets do differ in other ways, though. The agent is any entity or thing that acts or causes a reaction, much like a chemical agent. An agent, then, can be a who or a what. A person, animal, and storm are all examples of agents. Agency refers to how an action is accomplished, and can often be seen as a literal or abstract tool. A computer is the agency by which we watch this video. The act is the action that occurs and answers the question, what happened? The scene tells us when and where an action took place. And finally, purpose asks why an agent behaved the way it did. Burke's pentad can be manipulated to create ready-made analytical questions that are called ratios. To create a ratio, take any two of Burke's rhetorical elements, and plug them into the sentence, "How does X affect Y?" This can be said in other ways as well. For instance, how does X determine, shape, or influence Y? Some sample ratios are as follows. How does purpose determine the action? How does a scene shape the agent? Analytical questions help us to understand and enjoy the cultural texts around us, but sometimes it can be hard knowing what questions to ask. Using Burke's ratios will help you invent analytical questions and give you practice in analyzing until you feel confident devising your own questions. Let's review. SQ3R+R stands for Survey, Question, Read, Recite, Review, and Relate. It is a guideline for recursive reading and can help with both explication and analysis of a text.